All right. Well, let's see if anybody else joins in, but for now, we'll go ahead and start. I think everybody knows me today. Nidell from Synthesis VR. I didn't actually introduce myself last night, so tonight I'm introducing myself, or at this point I'm introducing myself. Today we are talking about basically content-related items. The things we'll hit on are basically things that are in the games and licensing section. And in the business hours section, as well as checking in your arcade. What you see right now is the test arcade that I use, and this will be the one that we can enter things in. Also, I may have left in things that we did yesterday with the training, but I don't think they'll affect what we're doing today. So if I forget something, I apologize. Just bear with me. The other thing is, if you didn't catch it, I think all of you have at this point. If you hover over the Zoom app, you'll see a share button. I'm sorry, not a share button. You'll see a chat button. You'll want to click on that and open up the chat. That's how you'll be able to ask questions of me if you need to. Put that at the top. And that way, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt, and I'll get to you as soon as possible. I talk a lot, as you guys might already know, so please don't hesitate to interrupt by sending a question, as I might rush through something if you, or you might feel like I've rushed through something you might have a question on. So in the test arcade, we'll talk about games and licensing. So in the games and licensing submenu, the tab up here, you've got game licenses. Now, you guys know that you'd have to actually have a paid subscription for Synthesis VR before you can access this section. But I think both of you, well, those of you that are on here, I should say, already have that. Once you have a paid subscription, you can go ahead and click on game licenses, and you'll see all the different games that we have. You'll see some new ones. The newest ones are on the top, and then it just sort of gets to the more originally installed stuff. Sometimes updates will also filter to the top, so if there's a change in the licensing, it will appear at the top as well. So something like Raw Data Arcade that we've had for a while, of course, makes it up more towards the top because it had a change in its something. I don't necessarily know specifically. So to license something, you basically go ahead and click on the license, and then you sometimes have a couple different options, usage and fixed fee. Now, everything should have a usage option, and that is your paid per minute usage. So this item, for example, is 4 cents per minute. And if you click on fixed fee, that will show you how much it costs every X number of days. Some cases it'll be monthly, some cases it might have a 3-month situation, some might have yearly, and some might have lifetime licenses. Now, keep in mind that this fixed fee is on a per station basis. So if you want a fixed fee for 2 stations, you'd have to get 2 licenses. Whereas the usage isn't specifically on a per station basis, but you do need to have the right number of licenses for stations. So that way you get the right number of keys. In my case, I've only got the 1 for the test arcade, so I can't do more than that. But if you had, for example, 10 stations, you need to have 10 licenses, whether it's specifically for usage or fixed fee. Now, keep in mind that with fixed fee, you do also have the option of not just having all stations be fixed fee, but you could actually have only a specific number of stations. So, for example, if you only found that you use this one ABC Paint on 2 or 3 stations, let's just say 2 stations, and you're paying more than $9 a month per station, it might be a better option for you to go through and do a fixed fee for 2 stations, and then the rest of your stations would be your pay per minute. And how that would work is that fixed fee would be floating between all stations, whichever one's being. So the first 2 stations that are going to be in use, if you're using 2 fixed fee, would then be under fixed fee. And then the rest, if somebody were to come in and start using the rest, that will be under pay per minute. So that helps save you a little bit of money versus just being forced into one or the other. So in this case, if I want to get a license, I would choose the number of licenses. In this case, of course, I only want the 1. I would then add it to the card. I'd go back and add in any number of other licenses as I go. If there's a bunch of new ones and I want to just add those in. Once I've added in all the licenses that I want, I'll go to the three-dot menu up here and then go under View Cart. Under View Cart here, you'll see that I have actually Thrill the Fight, of course, I did last night, so we'll ignore that. No need for a key. So in this case, you'll see that because I only have one license, it doesn't give me the option of choosing a station. But in this case, Thrill the Fight, which I happened to do last night, it allows me to choose which station. And this would be good if you're doing something where you'd want to have a specific station assigned to something. For example, if you're doing a test and you want to just put it onto a specific station, then that would be the better way to go, is doing the choosing the specific station, and then once you're done, you're going to click on Checkout, and that will process it. Now, if you're doing a fixed fee, you'll of course have to pay in advance, and you'll pay a prorated amount for the remainder of the month, because everything is usually billed on the 1st for licensing. But if it's close to the end of the month, so I'm not sure the exact amount, but I believe it's the last 7 days or so, it will charge you a prorated amount for the remainder of the month plus the following month's charge, because of course we anticipate you having it for that full month. So just keep that in mind. One other thing I didn't actually mention last night, but under here you can also see My Licenses. I don't know if it'll show anything here. This is just a test here. But this will show all your licenses and give you sort of a rundown for the month as to how you're doing for payments. So now after you've licensed a game, what you'll want to do is you'll want to refresh the station. You can do that in a couple different ways. If you open up the Access Point app and click on Refresh Station, that will refresh the licenses as well as a few other things, but primarily using the licenses. I'll show you another way in a little bit. But now we have this option right here. And then if we go to our Steam, which I didn't open, you'll see, although I don't have any specifically from here, but you will see something along the lines of a grayed out item. And the grayed out item, you would then have to right click and then install game. And that's how you know that you've got the license. I don't even think I have these installed, but so that's how you do that. And then now the game would become available in your synthesis. Now, if you go into, again, the Games and Licensing tab and go to Your Games, you'll see that this is the games that you show as installed on your system, or that Synthesis VR shows as installed on the system. Underneath each of the images, you have a few different icons. The first icon indicates that it's installed on which station. So if you have multiple stations and you hover over here, it'll tell you which stations you are installed on. So if you've missed one or you're not sure which one it's installed on, you can just hover over this right here. If you hover over the next icon, it tells you what categories that the game is set up on. So if you see a game that isn't listed on categories, that'll be a red flag for you. The other icon right here is whether the item is licensed or licensable, and if it's licensable through Synthesis VR. So for example, Climate is not licensable, it doesn't have a star. ATEX Cybernetic is and does have the star. Now, of course, this is a test arcade, so nothing is actually licensed on this arcade, so I can't use any of these. But it does show that that it can be licensed through Synthesis if I wanted to do that. Oops, just checking messages on Facebook here to see who's saying what. Nope, okay, it's just Greg. All right. So from this screen, you can also, one thing is refresh. So we had the refresh on the Access Point app, but if you click on refresh here, this will do the same thing. And this will be useful if you're doing it across multiple stations. So this will enforce a refresh from each station. Now, if you only have 2-3 stations, it's not that difficult to go to each one and use the refresh via the Access Point. But if you wanted to, if you had like, let's say 7 or 8 stations or more, this refresh would be much more feasible to use rather than going to each station and refreshing that way. This will just force that refresh. And this is good not only for licenses, again, it's also good for doing things like if you've changed a game category or work rules or something like that, this will refresh that as well. So you don't have to, again, go to each station and refresh them. Now, if we go into each of these, you'll see a few different things rather. You'll see the name and a description. Now, the name itself is something that the voice to text will change. So if you wanted to change the title of a game or how it reads it, this is a good way to do it. It'll also show up in your categories in the VR headset that this is how it will show in that. So just keep that in mind. But if you have something like that reads weird, for example, BAM Squad might read weird, so you can change that to be something different. The description will show again in the headset when the trailer comes up. It'll also show that the description with that as well. And it'll also show it if you're using, I believe, the categories online. Next couple things are for the trailers. Now, the logo URL is going to be this picture that shows up either in the headset or in this menu. You can change that. So if you have a better picture that you like, you can certainly change that. You just have to change this to the link that you have. It has to be online, not local. The video URLs, the WebM is what's used for trailers on the headset, and the WP4 is what's used for the idle playback. So if you use the idle playback option, then this would be the way to change it. So if you wanted to change the trailer for the idle playback, you can just change this here. So if you have something better than the one that comes with it. This is also good if you want to change, if you want to do the idle playback in a different folder, then this wouldn't necessarily matter to you, and that's just a subject for a different video. Game startup arguments would be things that would allow you to sort of change what happens when a game is launched. There are a few games that have different arguments to them that will change parameters. We don't have anything major to go through here. It might be worth doing another video, but I will highlight that, and we'll talk about a little bit Rec Room. Actually, we'll go ahead and open that. You'll see that Rec Room has some arguments, but I have a different thing. I have a variation. So the first form of Rec Room, if it gets launched, it's just going to be the basic Rec Room, no changes to it there. But if I want, what I've done rather, is I've added a game variation called Paintball that has a different graphic and also has different arguments that will launch. In this case, I've got my profile to start and my room name, which is Paintball, although there is no such room name, so don't try to go into there. This will allow me to start the game in a different variation than just doing it from that. And there are some games that might work for it, but specifically Rec Room is one of the main ones that this will be useful for. Next, we've got categories. Now, the category tab is good because now you can actually change a category right from a game. So if you're looking at these games and you say, hey, Cinderella needs to be in a different category, here are all my categories right here, and I want to enable it in my demo category. I can also change the position on the list that it is, but for now I'm going to keep it as is, and then we can save it from there when we're done. The last thing you'll notice is this tab that says More, and the More allows you to download all of your customers that have used this game. This is great. For example, if you're using somebody plays Arizona Sunshine and you know they like zombie shooters, you can pull this up, download all your customers, send out all your customers an email that says, hey, we now have a new game, LA Dead Zone, whatever, if you want to try that. So that would be a good way to sort of contact your customers that seem to like certain games or that play certain games and do that. There's another place in customers to do something similar, but this is more of a game-specific thing versus a direct specific customer thing. So that will be the good thing right there. And that's pretty much it for this section here. Probably worth another video in the future specifically with game arguments, but that'll give you an idea of how to use this screen. Keep in mind you can also filter in terms of stations right here. So everything right now is installed on my station 1. Station 2 and 3 are virtual, so there's nothing actually installed on there. It'll also allow me to hide install games. It'll allow me to ignore certain categories, so ignore rather categories and see which ones are not in categories. So that's that. Just take a quick break. Any questions here that anybody has? feel free to message them out. I'll move on until somebody says otherwise. So moving on to games and licenses. I'm sorry, game categories under games and licenses. That's the next major brunt of our explanation. So a couple of different things I'll point out on this screen right here. First of all, you got the title of the category. So we've got a few different options here, which we'll go through as to why I named them the way it is. Used in allows you to see at a glance which games are, which categories are used in which rules, which hours that you have assigned. So if you're looking at a category and you notice it's not signed up to anything, it's a quick, again, check to see if it's in there. Available game, the action shows you something we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's basically the way that the game category will show up. So we'll talk about that once we get into the section. And you have the action icons over here, which we'll talk about briefly. So the first thing you'd want to do is figure out how to add a new category, and that's in one of two different ways. Either you can click on the plus button here, or again, you can always click on the three-dot menu up here, and then click on Add Game Category. One note is Games Fine-Tune will take you back to the Your Games section, so you can do something there. So we're going to just call this one Test. And now we're going to show you how to add different games in a couple different ways. So the first thing is on this side right here, you have the list of all the different games that have ever been installed in Synthesis history, and those are games that will show up. And you can either scroll down the list, find something that makes sense, double click on it, and it adds it to the list. If you double click on the list, that will take it out and bring that item to the bottom. The other option is you can add in games by just typing in the name, oops, not date, data, and then adding it this way. And the last method of doing it is by assigning all your installed games here. And that will actually suck in all the different games that Synthesis recognizes being installed on your system. In this case, again, same thing. If you wanted to remove something, you can double click and it'll remove it. You can also click and drag, and that will rearrange the icons. And you can also sort them all alphabetically by just clicking this, and it'll sort everything off alphabetically. Again, you can also just change it up as you see fit. Once you've finished that, just click on Save, and it will save the category. And if we refresh, we'll see that that category now shows up. Now you'll notice that there isn't a used in down here, but the other ones do. While we're on the used in subject, let's discuss a couple of things. You'll notice that I have parties here, or party category and a demo category, and you'll notice that I have the party category used in the work rule parties. And under demo, I have in the work rule demos, but in nothing else. I also have No Arizona Sunshine being listed under parties and being listed under here, but nothing else is listed, other than parties, nothing else is listed in parties. This is important. We'll see that in action shortly. But now let's talk about a little bit about the action part of it and what this has to do and what these names have to do with it. So let's go ahead and edit this one. Now at the top you have different list types. You have 2 that are available games and 2 that are restricted games. Restricted access. So anything in available games means that once this category is attached to a specific work rule, it will show up. That will show up as a game category in that list. Restricted means that the games that are within this particular category will not show up in that session, in that work rule. So if you wanted categories to appear, if you want to have different categories, you use one of these. If you wanted games to not appear, if you're doing an under whatever 12 category, you would want to put those in here. Now enforced and optional basically are, enforced means that it will always show up if it's assigned to a certain work rule. So if I have all games, for example, assigned to 2 or 3 different work rules, that game category will always show up. Optional will not always show up and will, at the beginning of a session, allow you to decide whether you want that category to show up or not. And the beautiful thing about this is you can actually set it up to work on a per station basis. So if you have a family, for example, a family of 4, and they're all using headsets, and 2 of them are under 12, and you don't want them to see a category, you can just uncheck that as being you can set them up as optional, and you can uncheck the optional category. We'll see that in action shortly, but just know that that is one option. The other reverse part of it is the enforced. So the restricted. The enforced restricted means, again, if it's assigned to a specific category, any games that are within that category will not show up as a game, as an option. Optional, again, in reverse to the optional category of the available games, this will allow you to decide at the beginning of a session if you wanted to have certain games not show up for that specific session slash station. And again, we'll see that in action. One thing I just want you to note, just because I've got these set up. So on the left, I've got no BAM and no Arizona Sunshine. So just to note that in this particular category, the all the games category, this has both BAM Squad and it has Arizona Sunshine. So I just want you to remember that for future when we go into the arcade stuff, into the your arcade section and start launching sessions. Sorry, I should check that in the all the games just to make sure. So we have BAM Squad and we have Arizona Sunshine. So let's go and talk about how this kind of gels together. Again, feel free to ask questions if you have them. So going back to the administration section, we're now going to go into business hours. In our business hours section, you'll see that we have all of our different rules. Now, some of you guys should be familiar with these. We'll have a video about this, I think, in our next webinar. But for now, just so you know that these are your different categories or different experience types. So the main one I generally use, or the one that I would use in my main arcade, is going to be VR experience. And that you see is broken up into times and dates and things like that. And again, we'll get into that in the future. There's also party categories and a demo. Now each one of these, if you go in to edit them or create them, under the Games tab has the Assign Games. Now one thing that you should note is if there are no games assigned to a category or a work rule, it'll just be a home button showing all the different games available to you. Once you assign categories, then what will happen is the home button or the home category will just include everything that under the categories. It's one of those things you'll have to kind of see in action. So basically if there was a home button, it would only still show the things under demo. If I remove this, then it will show all the games I have installed. Something you'll have to experiment with, and something we'll talk about probably if we do go with with this being part of our next the work rules being our next webinar. So right now under this category, under the demo rule, I have only demo. So only the games in this category will show up. If I go into parties, I've got party, and I have the no Arizona Sunshine. And the no Arizona Sunshine is an optional restricted. Again, we'll see that shortly. Under the the VR experience, I've got pretty much every category. I've got all the games, I've got premium, I've got no BAM, and I've got no Arizona Sunshine. I should have noted under premium I have Sorrento and raw data, which are not in the all the games category. So again, close that. So now you see that I've got different categories set up for different rules, and I can do that as much as I want. If I just break down the rules into the different experience types, each one could have a different set of a different set of game categories attached to it. Specifically, like I like to highlight the demo one, because the demo one might only have a few different things. We just had somebody, oh, it's common. Hello. So we have a few different, I lost my train of thought. See, that's what happens. So under here we have the ability to add different categories under different types of circumstances, which makes it a pretty powerful thing because you can then control how you want things to show up. Now putting this all together, if I end up going to your arcade, you'll see first of all that I only have the demo assigned to Station 1. And we'll talk about this in a future webinar in terms of experience types and again work rules and how they might all work together. But note that in your case you might have this across multiple stations or you might have it across a single one. If I click on that as an example, and go to start a session, you'll see that it only has a limited number of games. It only has about a dozen different games as an option to play. You'll actually notice that I've also added paintball, which is the Rec Room variation, and I'll show you that a little bit later. I added that last night, but you'll see how that works later. So I can only choose from these particular categories. I can't choose from all my games. So, for example, again, Sorrento and Raw Data are not in this, or Arizona Sunshine, or BAM Squad. Those are ones that aren't in it. But that's because I've only got the demo experience attached to there. Now, if I go into my VR experience, you'll see that under this one, I do have some options now. So if you remember, I had the category, restricted category of no BAM Squad. So if I were to look at my games, even though all games are attached, you'll see that first of all, there is no BAM Squad. Well, you'll notice that there is Arizona Sunshine. That's because I'm under this no Arizona Sunshine, that's not checked off. So I can still access no Arizona Sunshine. But let's say I choose that I want to restrict that. If I click this and then go through and look through the menu, you'll see that now Arizona Sunshine no longer shows up, as it's now blocked. And one thing to note, if I were to do this across multiple stations, I have the ability to choose one station versus multiple stations, so that this station still shows the possibility of doing Arizona Sunshine, whereas this one does not have Arizona Sunshine. So again, going back to the family, if you want to restrict the kids from seeing the quote-unquote adult games and you want to allow the parents to still be able to do them, this is one way of doing it. Keep in mind there are other ways of doing it, but this is one way of doing it. Now the premium is a little bit different. So premium does show that I can do Sorrento, and it does allow me to start raw data. Whoops, clicked on that outside. And allows me to start raw data as well. Now the difference here is that this is a category. So if customers in the headset and you leave this premium checked off, they will be able to see this premium or whatever you call it category, and they're able to launch a game directly from there. If you uncheck this, the customer will not see that category, and of course will not be able to launch a game directly from that menu. You can, of course, if you want to, go ahead and start one of those games because it's still part of the categories in there. But if you don't want customer to have access to that for whatever reason, then you can uncheck this premium if it has a different set of games installed on it. And so this allows you to have sort of that premium option of saying, okay, well, if I have premium customers come in, I can set up a premium category that when they come in, I will turn that on if they pay that extra amount or whatever method you want to use. It can also be, again, this could be an adult category versus restricting. You can add in the adult category versus having it run in, rather doing a restricted and not have games show up. And that's one of the powers of Synthesis VR, where you can have a few different ways of doing the same thing. It just really comes down to how you want to do it, how you want to create that experience for that customer. And then lastly, of course, we got parties. So one method of doing parties with restrictions is you could have one party category. And one thing to add in, this is again a future webinar, you'll see that when I clicked on parties, it actually highlighted all the stations to do a walk-in. That is because this is set up as a complete station booking, and I have these 3 stations set up for that complete booking, and so it makes it a very easy, quick little click, and then I've got all stations, and then I can start a session across all stations this way. Again, a more in-depth conversation for a future time, but this will give you a brief introduction to that. But in this case, I only have the all games, or actually have party category, which for the most part has all my games. And then I also have the restricted category, which in this case is just called No Arizona Sunshine because the only restriction is Arizona Sunshine. So it's the same idea. If I wanted to just do it across all stations, I would just check this off, and now if it's a kids party, they would have access to the restricted games. Again, it doesn't have to be just Arizona Sunshine. This is just an example that makes it easy to see. So this way now I can start a session, start a party, and not have to worry about trying to the kids accidentally clicking, LA Dead Zone or something like that. Whatever I might have in that. Or you might have different parties that might restrict certain things, like an office party might not play certain games. Or again, in the reverse, you can have an office party that uses specific categories as optional, and you can choose those and have those go for the office party. You could have parties set up where it has different categories, and then you just choose which category is going to play for that particular party. Again, it's all up to you in terms of how you use it. Right now, we're just showing you the different methods of doing that. Again, feel free at this point to ask questions. This is a good break, and I'll go through the last couple of things here. Questions, anyone? Just going to wait a second. Drink some tea. All right. Last thing I want to go through, and then I'll just check my notes just to make sure, is the that paintball that I showed you briefly. So if we were going to, let's just go ahead and create a new session, a new category. And we're going to call this test 2. Now we created a variation for Rec Room Paintball, and we called it Paintball. So if I wanted to add it in, all I have to do is type in Paintball, and that shows me that Rec Room category that I created. And again, I just double click on it to add it. I have added it into the this right here as part of that. Remove it so I have it for my demos, and then save that. So that's one way you would add in variations. Once you've created them and added that name for that game, you can find it through that list there. And while we're on this screen back again, just briefly talk about over here. We have a few different buttons of access. So right now, delete, of course, will delete that. So we'll go ahead and delete this, and we'll see that that has vanished. Copy will, of course, copy a category. And the nice thing about copying the category is that it allows you to, if you have a master list that's easier to pare down by just double-clicking and removing stuff, this is a quick way of doing it. And then just don't forget to save it, rename it rather. Once you've renamed it, go ahead and save. And if we refresh, we'll see that game category has been added. And again, delete. We'll do that. And then edit, of course, we'll edit the category. So if you need to make some changes, if you accidentally added a game you didn't mean to, or you added new games, this is a way to do it. And advanced game setup is for right now only a couple of different games, Space Pirate Trainer and Beat Saber. That is essentially somewhat similar to launch parameters. There are some further things you can do that are beyond the parameters there. For example, party mode in Space Pirate Trainer, allowing you to potentially stop a game after somebody dies or their session, not session, when they die after the 3 times after their lives are ended. That's what I was thinking of. And there are different arguments you want to put in there, and then Beat Saber has its own. If you're interested in either of these, feel free to reach out to us and ask, and we can share whatever we need to. But that's kind of what that will do. And eventually more games will start adding those abilities to do more refined arguments versus just the launch arguments that are there. So let me just check my notes, but while I'm checking my notes, if there's anybody that has any questions, again, this is a good time to shoot them over and let us know if you have any questions about what we've talked about or anything specifically connected with the content stuff. So just checking my notes here. I think I've got everything. Yeah, it's pretty much it. So yeah, any questions, by all means, send them over. If you think of something after we've hung up, or as usual, if you have any issues or questions, you can always reach us on our Facebook page. You can send a message that way or post in the forum. And you can always send questions to info@synthesisvr.com if you have any questions that way, or if you have any support issues that come up or anything like that, by all means reach out. You'll be able to see this video later once I've had a little bit of time to edit it and we upload it, and then we can add it into our queue of different videos. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. We'll wait a couple minutes, and if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and end the session. And nobody sent me any jokes, so I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep while I was doing this. Okay, so I don't think there's any questions, and you're welcome, Frank. It was nice, not quite chatting with you, but seeing your dialogue. Great. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Thanks very much.